Well, maybe I will celebrate their 100th by having one this week. This will be my new experience. We are here for the study session. This is March 7, 2022, and I will let our city manager introduce our guest speaker.
I don't have a whole lot in the way of preliminary comments. Chief Nelson's here to talk to us about the Law Enforcement Citizen Review Board. We've got it established and got members appointed, and they've been meeting on a regular basis, so here to give you an update.
Thank you, sir. Mayor, Commissioners, thank you. I want to first identify Lieutenant Feldman here. He's the Internal Affairs Commander. If there's any questions I can't answer, I will look that way. That's why he's here. Next slide. The next slide will show you just a brief history of how we got here. The in-custody death of George Floyd, that obviously caused a lot of upheaval, turmoil in the entire nation, entire world. It wasn't the first event. There were other events, but that's probably what the catalyst was for as far as what took place here in many other cities in America and the world. I can think of Ferguson. In my mind, Ferguson was one of the biggest ones as far as, but that was back in 14, I believe. But it all just kind of led up to this, and it led to obviously the group being formed that looked at our law enforcement board we had at that time, advisory board. We'd had one for years under Chief James D. Hill. It wasn't, it was more of an in-house type thing between the county and the city. And we had that for years. Next slide, please. We did have 3 rather extensive town hall meetings. I remember that well. I think some of you commissioners were at all 3 of them, but we had 3, a lot of Q&As, had a lot of good topics, a lot of good suggestions. I mean, it did help me as far as to see what the community was thinking about actually having our own CRB, Citizens Review Board. I can say I was never, opposed to it. I guess initially I wasn't sure the need for it, but I can say over a period of time, I've definitely seen that it helps us as far as transparency and such. But just having the talk with the community did help a lot with me, just to see the need for such a CRB. With that said, we looked at a lot of different agencies, a lot of different departments, a lot of different CRBs, because they're all different. Every community has different needs. You can't have one cookie-cutter CRB board for every town in America. It just doesn't work like that, because all cities have different problems, different sizes, different populations, and for that reason, there is no set in stone template for what you do. You just kind of have to take the best that you feel is the best for your community, and that's what we did. We looked at a lot of different agencies, most in Kansas, but some outside of Kansas too, just to see what they were doing. And I was actually kind of surprised there weren't many that had CRB. I would have thought CRBs, I would have thought a lot more had them. But with that said, we assembled what we felt was the best for our community and presented it to the commission for their approval in the form of an ordinance. And after several changes, I mean, there wasn't a lot of changes, but there was some discussion about some topics, but it got passed rather quickly, but it got passed on December 7th, 2020. Former Mayor Hodges picked the initial commission board members, and we had our first actual meeting on May 5th of 2021. You can see there the original appointed members. The asterisks, I wasn't trying to call anybody out, but the asterisk means they've attended our Citizens Academy. And the Citizens Academy, initially, it was going to be shall attend, but it was after much discussion, it was decided to just be strongly encouraged. And the way our ordinance presently reads is board members are highly encouraged to enroll in and complete the Citizens Academy. And I highly encourage it too, but that's what the 2 asterisks there are for. Our next basic Citizens Academy will be in September. And once we have those dates out, we'll definitely save spots for the board members if they choose to attend. Unfortunately, we had 3 resign in a relatively short time. You can see then when it was. Various reasons. I mean, people just have things that go on in their lives that they have to pull out. But those 3 there resigned, and we've already added the 3 new ones. So we are at full strength, which is 9 members presently. These are the board activities starting within May of 2021. Obviously, you have your orientation. They pick a chair and a vice chair. Lieutenant Feldman gave a pretty detailed, just a demonstration or a process on how the complaint process works. When we receive complaints, how we handle them. We gave a Citizens Academy presentation. Again, that was just to encourage folks to attend. And we talked about CALEA a lot. And if you haven't looked up CALEA, please do so, because I think we're one of 11 agencies now. It might be 12, but it was 11 in the state of Kansas that actually is accredited, and that's a pretty big deal. You could have a whole study session just on that, but if you want to look up CALEA, and towards the end here, I'll have a slide where I can show you how to look that up. There's further board activities there. We did have one meeting at our new training center. We did it kind of twofold, just to have it in a different location, but also to show off, well, not to show off, but to show that building to the commission, or to the board members themselves. There was some talk about having it out there every time we have a meeting, but because it has to be filmed and such, we can't do that. But we did do that one time. We've also had discussions about the in-car and body-worn cameras. That was a very interesting topic about just the technology that we have between the body cams and the in-car cams. I had a pursuit presentation. That was well received. Pursuits are, I mean, from when I started in 1984, you would chase people because you can. I mean, that's just what you did. But it came full circle. Now we don't chase nothing like we used to, nor should we, but just times have changed. I don't think it means we did anything wrong necessarily in 1984, but just there's so much more liability, and there's so many reasons now to not chase people. But there's still, you just got to realize as a police officer, these are still people that are committing crimes. It's hard for us just to stop. But we do it. We do a pretty good job at just stopping if it's a relatively minor offense, if we're putting people at danger. If we know who the person is, if we know it's John Smith, then we stop chasing them because we figure we can get them later. But there's a million reasons why we stop chasing them. And I can assure you, when I started, we didn't stop chasing them. We just chased them. As far as the 2 executive sessions that were held regarding complaints of excessive force, they did have 2, and I will talk to you in more detail about that later on in this presentation. I just didn't want to cover it there, but I just want to tell you they have, in fact, heard 2 complaints regarding excessive force. This was just a little data that I hope you find interesting as far as our total calls for service. The green line is the total calls we receive, and then the calls for service, the actual 911 calls or the non-emergency calls, and then the blue is the officer self-initiated. If you're curious, you can kind of tell when COVID hit as far as based on the officer initiated. You can see the drop there during COVID because we strongly encouraged officers not to engage for minor offenses. We weren't stopping near as many cars. We weren't going to houses. We weren't going out in the lobby and meeting them. We were taking a lot of reports by phone and such. So your self-initiated calls are going to drop dramatically if that's what you're instructing your troops to do, and that's why that number is so low. That also explains some of the, as far as the actual drop in the numbers of calls for service overall. The next, and by the way, if you have any questions, just feel free.
I actually do have a question.
Yes, sir.
I'm just curious, what is the cutoff point as far as the pursuit policy? What level of offense do we say, hey, it's okay to pursue versus this is a no-go? Is it a property crime versus
Yeah, no, that's
crime? Or
Commissioner, that's a great question. I can say initially, almost the majority, I'll make up a number, 85% are because of traffic violations, right? That's what starts it, because you never know when you just light somebody up with your siren or lights what's going on in their mind. You just know they have a expired tag or they're speeding. But so basically, the driver decides when they're going to flee, and then we got to decide whether or not we're going to chase. And that's a whole lot. There's things such as speed. Is it downtown? Is it out on the highway? There's so many things involved. Like I said, do we know the person? But the bottom line is, if I had one thing to say, it would be if the danger to the public outweighs the positive factor of you arresting that person, then we stop chasing. And the officers can stop chasing. The supervisor can get on the radio and say stop chasing. But we shut down a lot more pursuits than we actually are engaged in for that very reason. But I mean, I say that to say this: bad things can still happen, but we are so much more cautious now about pursuits than we used to be years ago. Did that answer?
yeah, it does. Thank you very much.
I had one.
Yes, sir.
Your officer engagement initiation, I guess, is that trend, now that COVID restrictions are kind of tapering off and we're getting into spring, is that trend expected to?
It absolutely is expected to, but Commissioner, I can tell you how hard it is once you stop the train or once you slow it down on the tracks. It's hard to get it going again. But yes, we're definitely trying. But once you tell folks don't do this, and now we're going to say, okay, now start doing it, we're going to try to ramp it up again. But it's not instantaneous. It's not
Right.
the next day. But yes, I would be disappointed if it continues to go down, definitely, because we strongly encourage traffic enforcement. We strongly encourage self-initiated activity by the officers. In my mind, I don't know how you could just want to drive around for 10 hours anyway. You want to do something. So, I mean, we definitely push the self-initiated activity other than handling calls for service. The use of force definition, I thought you would find this interesting as far as somebody with a lot of law degrees is one who described this, but what use of force definition is. That shows you what it includes. I can tell you what it does not include. It does not include handcuffing. That is not a use of force. It does include the pointing of weapons, and I'll get to that the next slide, but it does include the pointing of weapons to include the taser. It used to be just pointing of handguns, but now it's the pointing of taser too. And if you go to the next slide, there's a note there. If you look at the red total use, it looks pretty substantial, 175 to 219, but that's actually 25 of those instances were because we started counting the pointing of taser in 2021, and we weren't doing that before. And if you wonder why, we used to not count pointing of a gun as a use of force either, but over a period of time, people want to know how many times you point guns at people, and I mean, I get it, but so once they start inquiring, we just throw that in there too as a use of force. The taser thing is the same deal. How many tasers? If you pull out a taser and you point at somebody and say you put the dot on them, oftentimes that'll make them not do what they're going to do. But that is a use of force. Even if you don't pull the trigger, it's a use of force. So anyway, in 2021, we started counting the actual pointing of a taser as a use of force. Next slide, please. Oh, I'm sorry.
Is that uniform across the state?
It's
With use of force,
Go ahead and come to the microphone.
with use of force, there is no standardized across the state or across the nation. We base our tracking of use of force based on CALIA, but there's no standard anywhere on what someone tracks and what someone doesn't track. It's all up to each agency.
And that's why sometimes it looks skewed, because if we're reporting everything and Hutchinson's not, I just made that up. If they're not, it makes it look like we're using it more, and that's why sometimes you should take the numbers with a grain of salt to some extent.
So presumably, this is a pretty conservative or all-inclusive reporting of use of force. I mean,
Yes.
Are you aware of any approach that would include anything above and beyond what we do?
Nothing comes to mind. I mean, I can see at some point, if I had a crystal ball, they would say if you merely draw your weapon but you don't point it, are we going to start counting that too? I mean, you know, that could happen in the future. But the way it is now, if you don't point it, you draw it, don't point it, does not count as the use of force. But that could be coming somewhere down the line. Hadn't been that much discussion about that. The use of force probability, I thought this was very interesting because I think there's a perception out there that we just use force every day and we use a lot of it. And I try so hard to educate people that simply is not true. And that's true of most police departments in the nation, but I'll only speak for the Salina Police Department. You can see there in our total calls of service, 210,000 plus calls that we had over 5 years, we used force less than 0.5% of 1%. And I will say that 210,000 number there is quite conservative because oftentimes you encounter more than one person, right? But it counts as one person, but there could have been 5 people there. So I think the number is actually higher. But with that said, we'll stick with that. But 0.417% chance of us using force against you in a everyday contact. Is anybody surprised by that, or I don't know if...
I have a question.
Yes.
This was in the news today, this subject that was arrested for breaking into the liquor store,
Yes.
and he resisted and fought. Is that considered use of force when he started it?
Oh, of course, yeah. That's a good question, but that's why I love the phrase that's possibly coming down the pike, but it's response to resistance, and as opposed to use of force. I actually like that better, but CALIA doesn't use that yet, so we can't use it. But generally speaking, like I said before, we don't walk up to somebody and just strike them. I mean, it doesn't work like that. We are almost always responding to some resistance from the subject. So in that, yes, I believe I don't know if we tased him, but that person was having somewhat of a mental health crisis. I mean, which doesn't matter as far as use of force goes, but I'm saying that would count as far as the use of force because we're trying. It's almost impossible to arrest somebody if they're resisting to not use some force. That's counted. In fact, I would say it's impossible. Whatever you're going to do to try the least force you can to get that person in custody, it's still going to be force.
Okay, in that case, there was 2 or 3 things that went on, the struggle, the taser.
Yep.
Is that two counts of force there?
Yes, on the same person.
Yep.
Yes. Good question. You go to the next, so if you remember, we were talking about overall 5 years of all the contacts we have with people. It makes sense that most of the force we are going to be used, or response resistance, is going to be used in a custodial arrest type situation. As long as I've done this, I can tell you the minute you say the magic words, you're under arrest, sometimes bad things happen. But that's when you're most ready, because you just told somebody you're going to take away their liberty, so you should expect possibly something to happen. But even in the total number of arrests we made in the past 5 years, which we arrested 10,149 people, as you can see, the force is higher, but again, let's use the word response to resistance. We use force 8.3% time out of 100 times that we arrested people, based on that. And I don't if that sounds high, I mean, tell me, but just remember, if you're arresting somebody, you're more likely to use force. It just is what it is.
I just hope there are a lot of repeat offenders. That's 1/5 of our population.
There are.
There are.
What do they think, 3% cause 85% of the crime in town or something? Yeah, that's definitely true. There's a lot of repeat offenders. The next slide has to do with complaints. These are the complaints we've used over the past 5 years. I'll let you folks decide if you think that's a lot of complaints or not a lot of complaints, but those are the complaints specifically for excessive use of force or bias-based policing. You did something because of their race, something because of their gender. That's what that is. And those are the total numbers of people that have made a complaint to the Salina Police Department in 5 years. A few of those were, by the way, those 5 were all determined to be unfounded, as in we couldn't support the fact that it actually occurred, or they were exonerated. And if it's exonerated, it means we can prove that didn't happen like you're saying it happened, right? And that's normally because of body cams. It's not because I say I did this and the suspect said, no, I did this. You can't really win. You can't decide you can't really pick a side. But if we have body cam that clearly says my officer did not do what you're alleging he did, that's when you're exonerated completely. Other than that, a lot of them turn out to be either sustained or not sustained because we can't really prove what they're saying for whatever reason. The next slide, that's a general order on who can lodge a complaint. If you read that, we probably need to add emails, but I'm pretty sure, because we take email complaints too, but that general order, they might, by mail, maybe we're talking about email too, but I think when this was actually written, they were probably talking about somebody sent you a letter, but trust me, we take email complaints too. And it's from any source. I mean, we take complaints from family members, and again, that's not something we used to do either. It used to have to be the person who's making the complaint who has a complaint against us. They had to be in front of us, but that's not the case anymore. We take third person complaints. There still has to be some type of substantiation that we can substantiate what they're saying, but we'll still listen to it and look into it and see if we can determine if in fact something happened. As far as complaints that we receive, it's not just obviously for bias-based policing or excessive force. Any complaint we receive usually starts at the sergeant level. Say it's an in-person contact, say it's a phone call. But the sergeant initially looks at it depending on what the complaint is. But generally speaking, your patrol sergeants handle the majority of our complaints. But once they reach a determination, then they pass it up to their lieutenant, who looks at it, see if he agrees, concurs. Then it goes to the captain, then it goes to deputy chief, and then it goes to me. I actually review every single complaint we have each year. There's a lot of people look at it before. And if there's video, we have a process in place where you have to be able to show me that you looked at the video and all the video. I'm not talking about hours of video, but I mean the video as far as the event where the complaint was made, the sergeants or the lieutenants have to check a box and indicate they looked at that video. Because there were some times where we weren't looking at the video. That's unfortunate, but it's been several years now that we've had to check off a box that says I looked at the video. So all the complaints that we get, like I said, they come to my desk. They're all, it's a computer program. They're all tracked. They'll be there, I guess, forever as far as also the findings, both the complaint and the findings, they're tracked each year. The next. This is the complaint process as far as if we have a bias-based complaint or excessive force. If it's going to go to the CRB, this is how it will work. The written preliminary administrative determination, that's my recommendation, and it's going to be one of 5 things. I'm going to say, my recommendation is going to be determination, not recommendation, determination. It's going to be it was unfounded, which means the investigation conclusively proved that the act complained of did not occur. It can be exonerated, which I've already explained, that we can show that nothing like that happened whatsoever. And in fact, you're not telling the truth, and we filed some false police report cases on that too. If we can adamantly prove that you made all that up, and the officer's exonerated, and we have video normally to show that, then we do file false police reports occasionally. Not sustained. The investigation failed to disclose sufficient evidence to clearly prove the allegation made in the complaint or to conclusively disprove such allegation. Sustained. Investigation disclosed that there is sufficient evidence to clearly prove the allegation made in the complaint. Or lastly, sustained against policy. I don't recall having one of those for quite some time, but that is where the investigation revealed a faulty policy and/or procedure. So that's the process. Once we receive that complaint, we have oftentimes special meeting, or we will have a special meeting. They'll, of course, meet in executive session. And once they clear the executive session, they'll come out and take public action if they so choose. The officer is not identified. The complainant is not identified. That's not how it works. We don't identify people. We do in the executive session, but we don't do it in a public forum by any stretch of the imagination.
How many complaints have they actually reviewed?
2, sir.
2?
2. Yes. I have that coming up there in a couple slides. As far as once we clear from the executive session, the next slide, there it is the determination. This is what the board will provide to me as far as they'll take a vote. They have 4 options regarding my initial or my preliminary administrative determination. Those are their options that they can vote on. If there's, go to the next slide, please. Once we have the CRB's determination, that's when myself, the city manager, and the staff liaison, Mr. Wood, will take a look at that as far as the determination as far as the actual complaint. And just to be clear, it has nothing to do with discipline. This is just whether or not the complaint, what their thoughts are on the complaint. But it's not discipline, just to be clear on that one. And of course, if the complaint is sustained or sustained against policy, I will take action to either provide some type of training, discipline for the officer, or we will obviously adjust the policy if there's some issue with the policy itself.
And I'm going to back up a quick
Sure.
question. You're the staff liaison during that part of the,
Mr. Wood is.
Mr. Wood. Okay.
I'm there basically just as the chief of police is why I'm there. The next slide, please. These were the 2 complaints that we handled in 2021 that was presented to the CRB. One of them was actually happened in 2019, so it really wasn't even a 2021 complaint. But again, we're still going to take them. They were both excessive force complaints. One from 19, one from 2021. We did have an executive session on both, and you can see there, the CRB agreed with my preliminary recommendation, and they were both not sustained. Either one they were not sustained as far as the allegation could not be proved that it actually occurred as the complaint was, and they concurred with my initial preliminary determination, which again, they don't have to, but I'm just saying in this instance they did. I'm glad they did, but they're not always going to, I don't think. I mean, there'll be issues, I'm sure, at some point, but that's why they're reviewing what we're doing for that very reason. Next. This slide, it really just goes to show you is to show you and the public as far as this is our police website found on the City of Salina website. I circled the SBD policies. Those have actually been on there since 2018. We get a lot of questions about our policies, and they're not a secret. They're really not. I mean, there's some that have to do with search warrants and stuff that are a secret, but if it's going to put one of my officers in danger, we're not going to put it out there. But the majority, by far, of our policies are posted on the web, and they have been since 2018. And then also that 2020 CALEA compliance review. It's 78 pages long, but if you want to look at that, it's a very thorough look at the Salina Police Department. And why it's 2000 is they actually do it every year, but they don't do it till July. So they won't do 2021 till July of 2022. But it's the most recent, and like I said, it can be found on our website. It goes into a lot of details, a lot of numbers, but it basically, I think, does a good job of explaining what we do and how we do it, and it's pretty complimentary of what we do. That's what you want out of CALEA. Somebody's looking at you, but I mean, it gives us some room for improvement, of course, but overall, it was a very glowing report, and it's up there. It would be up there if it wasn't glowing, but I mean, it's up there, and we'll put the next one up there, too.
Are the 12 accredited agencies all held to the same reporting standard? Or is there still wiggle room for each department? As the example you used,
Right.
removing the taser from the.
It's the
pointing.
same, but there's different levels, different number of standards. We're in the, you might have to explain that one, but there's two different ones. One has more standards, and one has less standards across the whole nation, actually. But as far as to answer your question, yes, we're all held to the same standards if that's what they're looking at. Right? It goes by best practices. It's not, they don't provide us with policies or procedures or general orders. That's not what they do. They review our general orders, procedures, and policies and determine if they're the best practice is what they do. And they do it, like I said, every year. They don't look at every policy we have, but they randomly select different policies we have, and then they review them to see, it's not only that you have the policy, it's that you're abiding by it. Because you can have a policy that says anything, but if your officers aren't abiding by it, it doesn't do any good. So we have to provide them proof, standards that we're actually doing what the policy says every year on random policies that they pick.
Chief, while we're on the topic, you might touch on 8 Can't Wait and the conversation that took place.
Yeah, I'm trying to think that's on there too. The 8 Can't Wait came about as far as that was right after the Mr. Floyd incident too. But there's a lot of things like lateral neck restraint, a lot of things that of these 8, I wish I could remember all 8 of them, but I cannot.
I can Google it.
It is pretty interesting because I prepared, the biggest was the lateral neck restraints, and we weren't doing those either. The other was duty to intervene. I mean, I can remember some of these, but the duty to intervene, we already had policy. If I'm watching one of my officers doing something blatantly wrong, I have a duty to intervene, which should have taken place in Minneapolis, but it did not, as you recall. That's one of the biggest things that happened. I'm trying to think of the others that were in there.
The main point is, the national conversation was these were high priority policies, and the presumption was that departments didn't have those in place, and we did. And partly, I attribute part of that to CALEA and accreditation and that conversation that was going on, and so we had them in place. I think the only thing that may have deviated from the 8 Can't Wait position statement is they wanted to ban chokeholds altogether. We treat it as lethal force, along with any other form of lethal force, but it was de-escalate. It was banning chokeholds, requiring de-escalation, requiring warning before shooting, and requiring exhausting all alternatives before shooting, a duty to intervene, banning shooting at moving vehicles, requiring the use of force continuum, and requiring comprehensive reporting.
And we had policy that covered all that. I mean, as far as the warning, I mean, that's, if you can warn somebody, yes, but sometimes it's not possible, especially if the person is shooting at you first. You lost your warning part there. But there are some things that, but I wasn't pleasantly surprised. I mean, that's what CALEA is supposed to assist us to do, to have the best practices. But we put that out there too, as far as our response to all 8 of those 8 Can't Wait issues back in 2000, I believe, or 2020, I believe. When we put that
The
out there.
title of that is It Can Wait?
8 Can't Wait.
Can't wait. The number 8 can't wait. It was 8
8
policies
can't
that
wait.
were prioritized as being urgent.
Is that on the city website or our website? The 8 Can't Wait. We put my response,
city.
I think it is on the city website. So so if you go to the City of Salina website, there'll be a part there where it says 8 Can't Wait, and that will be my responses to all these 8 different topics,
Okay.
concerns. And this is the last slide. Obviously, if any questions about what we just talked about, or I believe you got the 2021 annual report that I prepared to CRB. If you have any questions about that, that's the initial one, I've ever done. I think in the future, if I'm right, Mr. Wood, I believe the board will be doing that, but for the first one, that we just did that to get it started. If there's any questions about that itself.
About that specifically, no, but one of citizens' concerns before the board was set up was racial or other identifiable characteristic profiling used in random traffic stops. And it was brought up that it isn't always easy to track back to see the characteristics of the driver. Is any stop the driver identified enough to have some degree of the characteristic of the person stopped? Because, and the way I'm going with this is, at some point we had thought that maybe this board might be able to, when it's ready, just prospectively or retrospectively look at something to see if there's something that we don't know is going on. I don't know if it's ready to do it yet.
Well, what I can say, if you go to the 2020 CALEA compliance review, those numbers, they're already all there.
They are there?
It's,
Okay.
yeah, everything is there, race, gender, everything is there, time of day, time of stop. But as far as your initial question, I would say at night, you're much less likely to know who that person is, man, woman, black, white, brown. You just don't know, but you still log it, as such. You do have a chance, much more chance in the daytime. But going down that path there also, a lot of times if suspects' information's put out, well, put out as, say it's put out as a white male, a middle-aged white male with gray hair, well, we're going to stop a middle-aged male with white hair if he's driving a blue Neon, whatever, that we're going to stop him because of this call. It has nothing to do with, just traffic enforcement. But those count as the same thing. Those count as a tick, too, as far as who you stopped.
Okay. So it's all recorded, whether a citation is issued or not?
Well, if we have a written warning, if you give a verbal warning, which we don't give very many verbal warnings, but the written warning or your traffic citations, it's all going to be noted as far as that exact thing, yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I do have a question about the use of force continuum.
Sure.
It's just more, I think, my personal curiosity. The taser was not really, back in my day, when I was in that line of work, really wasn't an option. I guess there was an incident involving mace, and it was flammable, and it kind of put things on hold for a while. So where does, on use of force continuum, what is the order now? Is it pepper spray, taser, or is it taser, pepper spray, or do they fall into the same?
I believe taser and pepper spray are on the same level.
Okay,
And just like, I think we're close to the same generation as far as being police officers. In my day, we used mace a lot, but we didn't even have tasers, so that's why. But we've evolved into the taser. Now the taser is kind of the go-to for the younger officers right now.
I remember being told in the upper Midwest, there was an incident involving the flammability of mace.
Yeah,
In an experiment with it, they were using taser, and that lit the guy up.
On certain ones, they are flammable. The one,
Yeah.
the OC that we use is
Obviously
not
not.
flammable.
Right.
But that's one of the things they teach in taser classes. If there's any flammability around, not just OC or mace, but if there's gas or other combustibles, or you're in an environment where there's combustibles, you don't use the taser.
Makes sense. So I'm guessing that the advent of the taser probably came along at the same time the lack of the use of the LVNR, or lateral vascular neck restraint. I'm guessing there's probably a trade-off there.
yes, and then as far as the impact weapons like your baton or your ass, those went away. We don't use those at all except to break out windows because of the image of that baton or that. That's clearly why. Sometimes I wonder why we carry them, but we still have them, but we truly use them more to break out windows than we do as a force. The go-to, or what they first turn to, well, they first turn to voluntary compliant, but if that doesn't work, then the taser seems to be what the officers are going to on their belt.
Interesting. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or concerns?
In the Citizens Academy a few weeks ago, we went over the R1, which I was really impressed with. The fact that they said we're one of the only agencies that every patrol car is equipped with one.
Right.
And that's a,
Could you let folks know what that stands?
yeah, explain to the other commissioners what that is.
37 millimeter baton round that comes out supposedly roughly at the speed of if a baseball player threw something at you, a baseball at you. And we very rarely break them up. When we do, they're to reach out to someone, so it's not anything close. It's for somebody, the last time we used it, I recall, is a person had a knife, well, it doesn't matter where, but I recall that vividly. But the officer actually shot his hand and he dropped the knife, which was pretty amazing. 'Cause I don't know if that's what he's trying for, but yeah, it's more of a much more accurate taser, 15 feet-ish. And if you're more than 15 feet away and all you have, if you happen to have your R1, that would be what you'd use. And there's a lot of things you can't shoot in the head, you don't shoot in the groin. There's all these things you can't do. Some of the things you can't control, but yes, an R1 is just another tool we have. It's in the trunks of all our patrol vehicles. Like I said, it's a 37 millimeter baton round that will definitely get your attention. I mean,
It
You might
looks
explain what
very
baton round
intimidating.
is.
Once it comes out, they said that no one knows what they are.
when they come out and it's rather impressive looking if you've seen one, which is not the point, but it holds, I think, 7 rounds. Does that sound right?
5.
Well, thank you, Commissioner. 5, thank you. Yeah, yes.
I got to shoot it.
Very good. It's not going to penetrate you, it doesn't go into you, but it impacts, it hits you, and you definitely feel it, and it's all about pain compliance, because you can do it 5 times, I guess, if you wanted to, but if you do it once and it gets the results you want, that's when you de-escalate. You don't do it anymore, you just do it the once. We had them in a former job I had on our SWAT team, and we used them several times with barricaded subjects with knives, not so much weapons, but not so much guns, but if they have knives or things like that, it's a phenomenal tool to have at your disposal.
I didn't have any questions. I did have a couple comments, maybe. I know when we were going through this in 2020, there was, thoughts, do we really need this? But I do believe that we honestly structured this in such a way that it gives the law enforcement, the board, more credibility. And I think because of the way we handled that, it actually will help support and protect good police officers. And I really think in the long run, it was something we really need to do. A couple things that I know we have a couple commissioners here that weren't on the commission at that time, but one of the things is we did not give subpoena powers to this board, and also they do not have any disciplinary authority. So those are 2 important things as we were setting up this board that we thought were important, that I thought ought to point out to the new commissioners. One other thing I had, and I'm going to ask, this came up during 2020, was the Police Excellence Fund, and that fund's set up to help support the police department, and some of that's through gifting. And you might explain a little bit about the city commission's role in that now when the Excellence Fund has something they wish to gift or to the police department?
Right. Anything that we, actually, it's before we take possession of it, but if the foundation decides they are going to purchase something on our behalf for us, for an example, the virtual judgment simulator, we have 300 judgment simulator. We go through in front of the board, and it's an agenda item, and they vote whether or not that's something we actually need. Hopefully, if we ask for it, because the ideas come from me. I hope, I guess it could happen, it didn't, but with that said, the commission who actually approves it, and again, that's before we take possession of it. The foundation's been, well, I call it a foundation, but it's under the auspice of the Greater Salina Community Foundation, but they're our foundation for us, for the actual Excellence Fund. But yes, it's been very successful. It's not just in equipment either. It's for other things such as, most are familiar with the Officer Down Fund. I mean, if an officer is hurt or, God forbid, killed in the line of duty, this Officer Down Fund, the fund itself will help the family in any way they can. We've used it 3 times for officers and civilians that were in need at our police department, involving a fire, involving the flood, and involving a officer who had a major surgery. And the foundation, the Excellence Fund, stepped in and provided some monetary assistance for those 3 officers. Well, 2 officers and 1 civilian. Also, as far as we're no longer part of came out of that was we're no longer part of the military surplus program as far as all we have right now is one rather antiquated armored personnel carrier, but we don't have anything else through them, nor do we plan to have anything else come out of that. Which, yeah, that was something good that came out of that, too. And definitely, I concur with your earlier thoughts, Commissioner Hoppick, as far as I think it's just the whole transparency part between core and coma. That's what we're not doing anything. We weren't doing under the cover of darkness, but we were doing stuff in the Salina Police Department that the public didn't know. And yeah, I agree. It's helped a lot more to get it out transparent to the public. I concur.
Chief, are you in the back able to hear through the speaker?
I can hear fine.
Okay. Okay, sorry.
I can hear fine.
Thank you.
I have a comment. Honestly, Chief, I think you're being modest about the amount of work and time and effort it takes to be accredited. I mean, the amount of scrutiny that a department goes through to get that accreditation is tremendous, and the fact that we have that here, I think, is it's very noteworthy.
And I definitely appreciate that. I want to be clear, Chief James D. Hill started that in 1996. I've had 3 of them, and they are tough, but I've had 3 of them as far as reaccreditation goes. But yeah, that's a very good thing, and I can tell you when I first got here, there was some kind of little bit of push to stop doing it because it's so labor intensive, but I can assure you I wasn't going to be the chief that got us out of Kalia, so that didn't happen. But yeah, we're still Kalia. Like I said, I think we're one of 11 in the state.
Excellent. Any comments, questions, concerns from the public?
Dalton McDowell, Salina. Chief Nelson, you never went through with the canines. Are they service drug dogs plus tracking, catching capable dogs? And if they are, is that considered a use of force, or how does that? I know some departments have to have a felony before they will release the dog. How does the canine stuff work?
That's a great question, and the answer is yes to all 3. They do track. They will, they will bite if they have to, and it does count as a use of force. So every time you have a canine bite, it is a use of force. It's the same as if I strike somebody. It's a use of force.
I have another question I didn't add on. Is that fine? How does that work with KHP assisting the sheriff's office and other law enforcement agencies if they all if it's a felony stop and they pull guns? Is that per officer on use of force, or is that per incident? How does that all work?
It's per agency. But so KHP has their own way of reporting. County has their own way of reporting. We have our own way of reporting. But if 3 of my officers point guns at one person, it's 3 times we use force.
So some of those use of forces could have been on one single incident.
It's one.
It's one incident. Go ahead.
It's one incident, but we track the people that we use force against. So
Yes.
on a use of force, you could have multiple use of forces, pointing a gun, going weaponless, or pointing a taser, but it's all one incident. But 3 different suspects or 3 different options used against that person. But we don't track another agency's. That's up to them. We just track ours.
And that does happen. That's a good
Yes.
question.
On your pursuit policies, do you guys still use the pit maneuver at all, or is that just KHP anymore?
We never did, and we're not training that, but that's KHP does use that. It's not called PIT, but I know what you're talking about. But yeah, they do that. TBI, yeah. But with that said, and that's their policy. They do that. That's why you see their ginormous push bumpers on their card. And the reason we don't do those twofold, we're not trained, and those really aren't for inside the city type maneuvers. Those are for out in open, a lot more open areas where when the car does do its spin out, it's not going to hit pedestrians and such. That's why we don't do them. Plus, let's be honest, it's pretty dangerous. And if you don't train in it, you're not going to know how to do it. But we do not do that here.
Norm?
Norman Mantle, Salina. March 5th, 2019, the Salina Journal. You ought to read it. You're in it, Chief Nelson.
What is it?
March 5th, 2019.
Well, what is it? What is it?
Are you,
Well, you read it,
Okay, I'll read it.
or I'll share it with you after a while.
Perfect.
You guys got one tough job. You don't know when to and when not to. How do we trust you? When do you guys go forward with an action, or should you back down a little bit more, retreat from an area? In other words, are you pushing it too soon? Because every non-veteran I've talked to, we fear law enforcement. We went through hell. Anybody that's carrying a weapon, and I'm sorry, but the color of clothing, every non-veteran I've talked to, we do not like it. We're uncomfortable around you.
Okay. And
I wish you guys would change color of clothing, be a little, the good guys wear white.
We're white?
Well, it's better than what you're wearing.
Okay. Just to be clear, I'm a veteran too, and I've never heard that complaint before, but that's fine.
Have you talked to Vietnam veterans?
Of course I've talked to a Vietnam veteran.
Are you a Vietnam veteran?
I am not.
I am.
I appreciate your service.
I don't want your thanks. Every veteran I've talked to, they will tell you, we did not do it for the flag. We did not do it for mom. We did not do it for apple pie. We done it for ourselves. As Lieutenant Colonel Hal Moore said, that same exact words. You guys get a free ride on our shirt tail. And we don't like it the way we were treated. We were spit on, we were called baby killers, everything.
Not by me. Fair enough.
But you got one tough job. I just don't know how you can, when do you do it? When do you not take action? It is.
Well, and that's one reason we have that training facility, so that that decision can be made more accurately more often.
One guy makes all you guys look bad. You get a bad apple and it makes you all look bad. It's not your fault. It's not our fault.
I concur.
Yeah, we need you, but
Hey, Chief Nelson.
Okay, yeah. Okay, last time.
I know this is a little off subject. Do you mind going into your recruiting and stuff with the military and how many military personnel that retired or former military that you actually have on your force?
I don't know if I have the exact number. It used to be right around 30, which is pretty impressive for 75-ish officers that we have right now. We do a lot of recruiting along with other agencies at Fort Riley. We really do. I'm very supportive of the military. You know, every single military person doesn't become a perfect police officer. I'm not saying that, but they do have the foundation as far as in place already, if that's what they choose to do. And that's why we recruit so heavily at military bases.
I just want to say one thing. So I am the board liaison, so I get to go at all the meetings with Chief. And so I want to say one thing. First of all, Chief and Lieutenant Feldman have done a great job with this board, presenting information, providing all the feedback and everything with the board. The board has requested to review policies. So if you're from the public and you're interested in this stuff, you can come to those meetings. That pursuit policy, we covered it in like 5 seconds here. We spent 30 minutes covering that policy at the board meeting. So we're going into great detail and depth in those things. If you're interested in it, we'd welcome you to come to those meetings where you can ask questions and do that sort of thing in a much more detailed setting. So
Well,
that's all I
Chief
have.
touched on it, but the meetings are broadcast, recorded, and they're available online as well.
All right, thanks everybody for coming. We'll meet back here at 4 o'clock. It's 4 o'clock. Welcome to the weekly Salina City Commission meeting, March 7th. I'm going to ask the city clerk if the Kansas Open Meeting Act required notice has been properly provided.
Yes.
Thank you. May we have roll call, please?
Mayor Davis,
Here.
Commissioner Hoppick,
Here.
Commissioner Linkowitz,
Here.
Commissioner Longbine,
Here.
Commissioner Ryan.
Okay. Would all who are able please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We will start with awards and proclamations.
Item 3.1, recognition of March 7th through March 11th, 2022 is Entrepreneurial Week in the city of Salina. Mitch Robinson, Executive Director of the Salina Community Economic Development Organization, will read the proclamation.
Mr. Robbins.
Good evening, gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here today and to read this proclamation. Whereas the city of Salina recognizes and values the dedication and entrepreneurial spirit within our community, and whereas our nation and society in general have benefited greatly from everyday use of once radical breakthrough innovation developed and brought to market by entrepreneurs, and whereas entrepreneurial firms are a critical component to the spread of economic stability throughout the world, and whereas, now more than ever, finding a path to success is defined by an individual's ability to turn their ideas into reality. And whereas the city of Salina supports and joins in this local effort to help the region's small businesses do what they do best, create jobs, and ensure that our communities remain as vibrant tomorrow as they are today. And whereas Startup Salina, Salina Community Economic Development Organization, the Salina Chamber of Commerce, Kansas State University, Salina Aerospace and Technology Campus, Salina Area Technical College, the Temple, Kansas Wesleyan University, SCORE Wichita, and Network Kansas have planned activities throughout the week to inspire, connect, inform, mentor, and engage the next generation of entrepreneurs. And whereas the week of events will accumulate in a live pitch competition on Friday, March 19th at 6 p.m. at the Temple, 336 South Santa Fe in Santa Fe. 10 applicants have the opportunity to give a 5-minute pitch and have a 5-minute Q&A before a panel of judges. Top prizes include $8,000 for first prize, $5,000 for second place, $3,000 for third place. Benton State Bank and JRI Hospitality are underwriting the prize money. And now, therefore, I, Dr. Trent Davis, Mayor of the City of Salina, do hereby proclaim the week of March 7th through March 11th, 2022 as Entrepreneurial Week, which acknowledges and celebrates the achievements made by small businesses both locally and nationally.
Like this,
a mouthful.
a proclamation with prize money. That is nice.
Yeah, we're quite excited about it.
Our kind of version of Shark Tank, Salina?
That would be, yes, that would be, I don't think we quite have the money power that Shark Tank brings, but we have some very influential business people taking part as judges, so.
Very nice.
Great. Do you happen to know, Mr. Robinson, if each one of the contributing organizations has listing of their activities on their own websites, or is there a central?
Well, we have and I'll give copies to everyone before I leave, a listing, and I'd be more than happy to go over them very quickly, not
Please.
taking as long as I did already. Tonight is the first event, of course, starting here, and then at 6 o'clock, we're going to be at
Kansas State University at the Technology Center in room 111. We have a panel discussion of small business roundtable. This will be some successful businesses here that have used the funding program that the Chamber of Commerce has. So we're excited about hearing about Soggy Dogs as an example. There's been several businesses. You can go up and down the streets of Salina and see these successful businesses. That's just one of the ones. On Tuesday is our Youth Entrepreneurial Challenge, which this is a program through the Chamber, through Eric's activities. And these are high school kids from District 305, and they are competing for a $500 top prize. And we hope to encourage the winner to come and join us on Friday night and see if they would be willing to take part in the Friday night competition. So that's on Tuesday. Wednesday, we have a Women in Business panel. We have 4 local successful business ladies who will be talking about their success of their program, how they got into selecting their business, so we're looking forward to that. Thursday, we have a social media marketing workshop that's going to be held at the Salina Annex. This is sponsored by the SCORE chapter of Wichita. SCORE is the Senior Corps of Retired Executives. They're a group that we work with very closely. And then on Friday is the pitch competition. Starts at 6 o'clock. Again, each competitor will have 5 minutes to do a presentation, and then they'll have a Q&A period after that. And then at the end of the evening, we'll be voting. We'll be actually voting as we go along, and then at the end of the evening, we'll select the winner. And today, I've got my chairman, Paul Freed, is with me. My assistant, Robin Van Atta, is there in the back. Of course, Eric is here, and he'll be up here in a second. But the chamber, it's been a very good cooperative effort between the economic development groups here in the community, and we're excited about this first-time effort.
So if anyone has an inkling of an idea, this is the week to get started.
This would be, well, we'd be a little late for this week, but there's always next year.
Or to come to the session.
But they can come and learn and be educated, and we'd be more than happy to talk to them about helping them with their project, their ideas.
Thank you. Let me give you this
Okay.
official signed proclamation. All right, we will now move to 3.2.
Item 3.2, recognition of the month of March 2022 as Cozy Inn Month in the city of Salina. Eric Brown, President of the Salina Area Chamber of Commerce, will read the proclamation.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Commissioners. Excited to be here. I think this business has been around before the word entrepreneurial was around, so. But let's get started. Whereas the Cozy Inn was established in 1922 and is celebrating 100 years of continued operation at its location at 108 North 7th Street, Salina, Kansas. Whereas Cozy Inn founder Bob Kinkle began frying his onion-laden coin-sized burgers at 108 North 7th Street. Whereas Steve and Chris Howard, current owners and operators, have continued the strong tradition of owning and operating the Cozy Inn since 2007, which was founded and created by Bob Kinkle, where, upon his passing in 1960, was followed by his wife Catherine and her husband Richard Pickering, which upon their passing in 1997 was operated by Max Holthouse, Greg Boyle, and Monty Shadwick until 2007. Whereas Cozy Inn survived and thrived through the Depression of the 1930s, the local impact of World War II and of the 40s, and the advent of the fast food market that has been part of the American way of life for the past 60 years. Whereas the Cozy Inn has received the honor of recognition as one of the 8 wonders of Kansas cuisine. Whereas Cozy Inn is nationally known as one of the last remaining 6-stool diners in America. Whereas Cozy Inn has been featured on the Travel Channel's 101 Tastiest Places to Chow Down and as one of America's top 10 hamburgers. Whereas the Cozy Inn was picked by USA Today as Best Burger Joint in Kansas and received the Diamond Award from AAA. Now, therefore, I, Mayor Trent Davis, do hereby proclaim the month of March 2022 as Cozy Inn Month. and encourage all citizens to support a nationally recognized local institution which has been a fixture of downtown Salina for 100 years. We wish continued success to current and future caretakers of a local landmark. And I'd also like to recognize, Steve, if you want to come up, Steve and Chris Howard, they're the owners. And hey. And Steve, if it's all right, Mayor, Steve will talk a little bit about March the 12th and the activities going on.
Please.
Hi, everybody.
Hi there.
Wow, 100 years. I've been part of it for 15, collectively 43 years between us three that are here now, or together anyway. And so also for Saturday, March 12th, we have, there'll be a ribbon cutting at noon. We're going to open pretty early that morning because people are just, I think they're just going to come out of the woodwork. And it's going to be overwhelming. Hertz Donuts is going to come up and try to lighten the load a little bit. Hopefully the people will eat a lot of donuts. They're going to be eating a lot of burgers. And anyways, oh, and we have a bounce house scheduled to come, paid for maybe if the weather's permitting. Anyway, 100 years, it's a long time. We are all over the internet. Well over 90% of my business are travelers. Some of them come in. We've been on MSN a few different times. And then the Daily Meal in 2020 picked us as the best hamburger in Kansas. And then for 2021, Google picked us as best hamburger in Kansas. And it just, you know, it goes on and on. I do like to note that, or say that the 101 Tastiest Places to chow down, they put us in at 69 on that number, on that countdown. And then the America's Top 10 Hamburgers, they put us in at number 6. And it just goes on. You know, the local awards are great, but I like my national awards too. And this is my daughter, Andrea.
Hi.
She'll be taking over one day. Do you have something to say?
Yeah, he left out, so on March 12th, we're also doing a bunch of giveaways. We have a thing at the store now. You can come in, fill out your name and number, and we're giving away T-shirts. We actually found some old hand-painted trivets that we used to sell, old Cozy and Tile coasters, and then T-shirts, and we're going to have a grand prize. We're not sure what that's going to be yet, but it's going to be worth putting your name in. And I think that's all that you missed on that, but.
I purposely left that out so she would jump up here and take over for me, so she speaks better than I do. Good job, you passed.
This is going to set the bar, money, and now food here.
Yeah. What else do you need?
Right. I feel like we should just reconvene across the street here. All three of you come on up front here and pick up this proclamation.
Thank you.
Okay, we do not have any public hearings, so we can go to the consent agenda.
Item 5.1, approve the minutes of February 28th, 2022. 5.2, award the bid for project number 22013, 2022 chip seal to Circle C Paving and Construction of Goddard in the amount of $149,279.40 with a 5% construction contingency for a total project authorization not to exceed $156,743.37, and authorize the city manager to execute a contract with Circle C Paving and Construction of Goddard upon fulfillment of all prerequisites under the bid documents.
Thank you. Is there any item Commissioner would like to pull off the consent agenda? Okay, entertain a motion.
Mayor Davis, I move we approve consent agenda items 5.1 and 5.2.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0, and we'll proceed to 6.1 under administration.
Item 6.1, approve resolution number 22-8024, amending the City of Salina classified pay plan to add a new classification to the wage salary schedule.
Welcome back.
Hello, good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. Jeff Hammond, Director of Parks and Recreation. On September 13th of 2021, a presentation was made to City Commission regarding the Bill Burke turf fields and facility improvements. The study session went long that day, and we were unable to finish. However, we were able to continue the study session presentations on September 20th. The focus of the study session on the September 20th was enhancing and revitalizing 25 existing bathrooms units across all of our parks. The total study session presentation is attached in your packet. The scope of work to revitalize and enhance our public bathrooms were to solve many problems associated with them. It has dim interior lighting, a poor or lack of exterior lighting, older lighting controls, the flooring in our bathroom system, which tends to hold stains and odors, security of the bathroom spaces related to vandalism and misuse, limited air exchange to allow for the removal of stale, humid air or odors, a lack of consistency in the finishes, flooring and plumbing fixtures, and a lack of updates to the exterior of the building. The bathroom enhancement and revitalization project include many things, including entry time locks, epoxy floor finishes, epoxy wall paint for the interior, LED lighting and motion-controlled light switches, electrical improvements to the building, roof repair and replacement when needed, exterior trim repair replacement, exterior surfaces repainted, exterior surveillance and security cameras, standardized plumbing fixtures, new partitions, and a high volume air exchange so we can get fresher air in there. With this project, we would be able to achieve the objective of improving our customer experience and improve service quality of our parks and athletic facility bathrooms. This will also have an added benefit of being able to being easier to clean for routine cleaning and deep cleaning, and also addressing some ADA concerns. The proposal for the bathroom remodel was to self-perform this work. What I mean by that is we were going to do that work in-house through our facilities maintenance division. This will allow the city to control the schedule, the quality of work, and labor to ensure a timely project. Some of the highlights of what we're looking for in a construction technician under the facility maintenance division to perform highly skilled tasks in construction and repair of new and existing buildings and infrastructure, reads and completes layouts of architectural drawings and engineer drawings, supervises subcontractors in the field, and manages material needs and use. We believe that a candidate would consider the wage for the position and medical and retirement benefits that the city employment offers. It would be an attractive opportunity for someone in the construction trade based on that wage and benefits. Additionally, the position will offer the stability of year-round employment, consistent working schedule, which the private sector may not be able to offer. We've identified some action items for you to consider today. Approve Resolution 22-8024 to add 2 construction technicians to the City of Salina classified staffing table. Number 2, approve Resolution 22-8024 with amendments. 3, postpone consideration of the resolution to a specified date and time and provide more information. And 4, vote to deny Resolution 22-8024, resulting in the pay plan remaining the same and not create these positions. of construction technicians. Staff recommends number 1. If you have any questions or concerns, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, I'll start on the left. Any questions?
I guess I would, first question I would have is, what's our backup plan if we would only be able to find one qualified applicant, or if we were not able to hire any applicants that met the requirements to continue to meet the demands of updating our bathrooms?
I don't have a ready answer for that, but however, the alternative to me, it would be contracting it out, which would increase our expenses and increase our timetable for making this happen.
I guess my main concern is it seems like the labor market right now is pretty tight, so
Yeah.
I'm for it, but I'm just curious as to what our other options would be, so. Thank you.
This is a little maybe off topic since you're asking for new positions, but in reading the other materials, I was wondering where are the downtown bathrooms located that are mentioned in the report? There's 3?
Troy, you want to help me with this one? I visualize them, but
I can come up with 2 of them.
I want to ask Troy Reiner, facility superintendent, to assist me with the answer of that one.
Currently, we have 3 downtown bathrooms. One of them is located in the parking lot, public parking lot next to Curly Donuts, sort of off of Iron and 5th. We've got one located in the parking lot behind Old Chicago. And the last one is located in the public parking lot right behind the United Building.
Okay. Been here a long time. I didn't realize those were there. How come SDI doesn't take care of those bathrooms?
I don't know. Good question, but park staff has always taken care of those bathrooms.
Okay.
Obviously, this work's going to be done under Parks and Recs, but these employees are not assigned specifically to Parks and Recs, or exclusively, or
They would be under the facilities maintenance division of Parks and
of Parks and
Recreation.
Recs? Okay.
With the intention of being dedicated to these tasks.
And obviously, once this gets done, future similar projects.
Yeah, there's
Of
plenty
which
of
there'll
work to
be
be done.
plenty. Right.
Right.
And what we are approving today is not the fundings, just adding the positions.
Yes, I think the fiscal note described where the funding will come from, and that's already in place, but this would be approving the positions.
All right.
Yep, editing the staffing table to give us the authorization to pursue that.
Thank you. Any questions, comments from the public? No one? All right. Any action to be taken?
Mayor, I move we approve resolution number 228024.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved and approved to approve resolution number 22-8024. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you. Item 6.2.
Item 6.2, approve ordinance number 22-11101 on first reading, amending the Salina Finance Ordinance to remove portions of sections 2-240 and 2-241 to make the establishment and amendment of petty cash and working cash funds for all funds except utilities, related funds, an item actionable by resolution.
Ms. Pack.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. Debbie Pack, Director of Finance and Administration. Currently, there's 2 separate Kansas state statutes that direct how cities can set up working and petty cash funds. The first of those is directly related to utilities, and under that statute, a utility petty cash fund must be established by city ordinance. The other statute, 12-171, allows the city by resolution, however, to authorize petty cash funds for any other departments of the city. In 1997, the city adopted an ordinance which created section 2-240 and 2-241, authorizing and establishing petty cash funds and working cash funds. The difference between those 2 funds is a petty cash fund is typically cash on hand to pay for minor or reimburse minor office expenses. Working cash fund is intended to be used for change for customers that come in that are paying for a service in that department. In addition to bringing forth these changes through an ordinance, there's 2 readings to the ordinance, and we also must pay an outside party to put that ordinance back into the Salina Code. And so staff is recommending through this ordinance that we remove all of the funds that were established for petty cash and working cash funds out of the ordinance and create the ability to be able to change those or add those via resolution, and to leave the utility fund under the resolution and under the code at this time. I did provide in anticipation of this ordinance, if this ordinance were to be adopted by City Commission, there is a need to make a change at this point. That's why it's coming before you now. So we will be bringing that action back to you on March 14th when we have the second reading of this ordinance. There is one typo in here, which may have made it a little bit confusing. The change coming forward would change the solid waste fund, not from $200, but from $300 to $400 in order for them to meet the needs of their cash customers at the landfill. Staff action items for you is to approve 11101 on first reading, to approve the ordinance with amendments as you deem appropriate, to postpone consideration of the ordinance and give us further direction for information you might need to make that decision. You could approve on first reading and also give us guidance if you need additional information for consideration, or you could vote to deny the ordinance, which would result in every time we need to make a change or an amendment that we would have to come back with an ordinance. Staff recommends option number 1, and I would stand for any questions.
Start on the right. Questions?
Seems like a lot of work for petty cash.
I know. That's what we thought too.
Any questions, comments from the public? All right, bring it back to the commission for action.
I'll make a motion for approval of ordinance number 22-11101 on first reading.
Second?
It's been moved and moved and seconded to approve ordinance 22-11101 on first reading. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. And we may now move to development business 7.1.
Item 7.1, Property 6 LLC. 7.1A, approve ordinance number 22-11104 on first reading, amending section 42-415.2 to add travel center and/or truck stop, short-term recreational vehicle parking area accessory to hotel, motel, truck stop, or travel plaza, and many warehouses to the list of conditional uses allowed in the South 9th Street Corridor Overlay District. 7.2B, approve ordinance number 22-11105 on first reading, changing the zoning district classification from A1 zoning district to PC5 zoning district on a 25.10 acre tract of land located at the southwest corner of 9th Street and Waterwell Road.
Mr. Andrew.
Mayor Davis, my company currently has an outstanding order on this property, so I'll be recusing myself at this time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. This application involves it's actually two applications from a single applicant. One of them is for an amendment to the South 9th Street Corridor Overlay District regulations. The other one is a map amendment to change the zoning of the property at the southwest corner of 9th and Waterwell. Because they're so intertwined, they need to be considered as one. So the background on this property dates back to 1999, and at that point, the City Commission agreed to create a water and sewer benefit district for extending water and sanitary sewer service down South 9th Street. And as part of that, a number of parcels on the west side of South 9th Street were annexed into the city, and this property, then known as the Miller Tract, was annexed into the city and included in that benefit district. The property was annexed, but there was an agricultural deferral that was granted for the special assessments. That 15-year deferral has expired, so the assessments are now being paid. The other event that occurred was in 2003. Construction began on a new interchange at Waterwell and I-135, and that was constructed in 2004. And as part of that project, you can see the right-of-way for the northbound interchange ramp was taken out of this property, which reduced the size. This is coming before you because Mr. Mark Augustine has a contract to purchase this property. He's interested in developing the site with a travel center, short-term accessory RV parking, and possibly many warehouses. And staff met with Mr. Augustine, and we looked down the potential list of uses that were allowed in the overlay district, and we determined that 3 of those uses were not currently allowed. So he requested to amend the text of the district to add those uses, and then asked that those be included in the district if it were formed for his property. So normally we would have a requirement that there would be a preliminary plat for a property, including a drainage study. That would be filed concurrently with the zoning application. Because Mr. Augustine is attempting to purchase this property on a contingent basis, and he wants assurances that he can use the property for its intended use before he completes the purchase, we've agreed to process the rezoning application with the understanding that if his request is approved, once ownership transfers, then the property will be platted before there's any final zoning change. And so on page 2, we've listed the 3 uses that Mr. Augustine wants to add: the travel center and a truck stop, the short-term recreational vehicle parking, that it's accessory to a hotel, motel, or truck stop. That was an item we discussed a few meetings ago. And then he wanted to add many warehouses, which is also not listed as a use in that district. And he believes that this tract and other locations along the corridor are suitable for these types of uses, and he wants to know whether these uses would be allowed before he completes his purchase. So this South Ninth Overlay District we discussed earlier with the rezoning of the home property across the street, but the area in red there is the overlay district, and it was primarily designed to accommodate car dealerships that were seeking to relocate along South 9th Street. And this particular property has 1,250 feet of frontage on 9th Street, 800 feet of frontage on Waterwell Road, and it has interstate and interchange frontage now, so the applicant believes it's a prime commercial site because of its location at an intersection and adjacent to an interchange. This is part of a growing commercial corridor that just grew a few weeks ago when you approved the rezoning for Mr. Holm across the street on the north side of Waterwell Road. It's primarily been developed with automobile dealerships, but we also have the roadway into the south. The red area you see, PC5, to the south of this is the site of a hotel. So this item went before the Planning Commission on February the 15th, and at the conclusion of the public hearing, the Planning Commission made 2 recommendations. They made a recommendation that the list of conditional uses be expanded to include truck stops, travel plazas, and short-term RV parking, but not mini warehouses. And then they made a recommendation that this property be recommended for a zoning change from A1 to Plan C5 with the uses that are listed in the report on page 6 and 7. And so the only use that they did not include in their recommendation for this district, again, was mini warehouses. And the majority of commissioners did not think that this was a desirable location for that use. And so this comes before you with a recommendation for approval on both items. But as to the text amendment that is in your packet, 221104, does not include mini warehouses on the list of uses. So your options as to the text amendment and what uses should be allowed would be to concur with the recommendation of the Planning Commission and leave mini warehouses off the list. You could amend the ordinance that's before you to add mini warehouses to the list of conditional uses in the overlay district. You could postpone consideration of the text amendment to a future meeting date to allow additional information to be provided, or you could maintain the status quo and decide that no additional uses should be added, in which case the motion should be made to deny approval of Ordinance 22-1104. As to the map amendment, which is 22-1105, that would change the zoning of the property. You would have the option to concur with the recommendation of the Planning Commission. You could concur with the recommendation of the Planning Commission and approve the ordinance with the addition of mini warehouses as a permitted use on this property. You could refer the application back to the Planning Commission for reconsideration. You could pause and direct the applicant to submit a site plan for your review as part of the rezoning application. This would result in the item going back to the Planning Commission. Or you could overturn the recommendation of the Planning Commission and decide that the current agricultural zoning should stay in place. If that were to occur, the only use of this property that would be allowed would be continued farming. So with that, I would be hopefully able to address any questions that you have, but the only disagreement that the Planning Commission had, and it wasn't unanimous, but there was not a belief that many warehouses fit at this location. I don't know, Jacob, you could go back to that site plan. I would just, again, this is not part of the application, but it was the concept that was shared with the Planning Commission, and it's not really easy to read, but the concept for how Mr. Augustine would develop the site if he purchased it, this was shown as a possible hotel motel pad, and then he had accessory RV short-term parking here, and this was designed to be a travel plaza, and then tucked behind the travel plaza was mini warehouses or mini storage complex. So it is not, again, part of the application. At some point, a specific site plan would come back, but that, it's difficult to read, but that is the concept that Mr. Augustine has, or vision that he has for developing this property if his request is approved.
Just for clarity's sake, to agree with the Planning Commission, the 7.1A as it's written in the agenda would not be the correct.
It's written that way in the agenda because Mr. Augustine's application includes many warehouses. The ordinance that's attached, 22-1104, that's attached for your consideration, does not include that because the ordinance was based on the recommendation of the Planning Commission. It's within your discretion to modify that, but I just wanted to point that out. Mr. Augustine applied for mini warehouse, and the Planning Commission recommended that mini warehouse not be included.
I just wanted to make that distinction. Very often we will read from the agenda, but that is.
Yeah.
So we can add that many warehouses to an amended version.
Right. So one of your options is to concur with the recommendation of the Planning Commission. Your other option is to concur, but to add mini warehouses to the list of uses. So that option is available to you at today's meeting.
In the transcript that you provided us of that Planning Commission meeting, it seems they were concerned about the aesthetics of the mini warehouses from the highway.
Yeah, they were concerned about whether many warehouses or many storage whether they needed to be in high visibility locations or gateways into the community. That was their concern, was the aesthetics.
Even though the area is full of large warehouse-type buildings all up and down that whole corridor. I mean, Phillips is across the street.
Well, they're tucked away. I mean, they're on the other side of 9th Street, but I could see it might send a confusing message to put a nice hotel up and then have the storage units right in front of it. It might influence my decision about which hotel to stop at, but I can see why they had the discussion, certainly.
Yeah, there was some confusion amongst the planning commissioners about what future discretion that they had, but where I didn't want them to end up was have them approve many warehouses and then try not to approve them because they didn't like where they were being located. I said, either you think that's a good location for them or you don't, but don't approve them and then try to come back later and not approve a site plan for them when you've already approved the use. So they decided eventually to recommend that the use not be included. But it was primarily aesthetics driven, although you are correct, there is a mini warehouse complex on the east side of South 9th Street across from Long MacArthur Ford. So
Is there space there for warehouses and the RV parking?
well, I'll have Mr. Wood go back to there's 25 acres on the site, so it's, if you compare it to for instance, the home site across the street is only a little over 9 acres, but this has 25 acres, so this is very conceptual, but his idea was that there's space here for a hotel or motel. This would be an adjoining travel center, travel plaza. Here, between the back of the motel and the interstate, would be a place for accessory RV parking, similar to what he has over in Abilene. And then this area behind the travel center is what he was envisioning for mini storage.
Well, I'd like to hear from the applicant, but he's taking the risk here, so I just don't feel comfortable about being a judge of aesthetics when he's making the investment. But
That's why we have the planning commission. What, Mr. Block, Andrew, I wanted to call a different last name. I knew it wasn't right. What's that in the lower left-hand? Looks like a
Oh,
horse
this
racing
right
track
here?
there. Yeah.
This is just a conceptual location for a detention basin. What Mr. Augustine and I have discussed, and it still require permission, but just to the south of this is a detention basin for the motel here, and this basin is about 10 to 12 times the capacity that it needs to be. So if an arrangement could be made, this would not be necessary, and Mr. Augustine could potentially drain his excess runoff into this pond, which has more than enough capacity to take it. That would require an arrangement with that owner, but this is just a conceptual area for where a detention basin could be.
Okay, thank you.
Is this in the flood zone?
No, it's
I've
not.
seen
It's
this
not in any
underwater
kind of
many
floodplain.
times.
It's in an area that doesn't drain particularly well, but it's not a flood zone. So this particular, the borrow pit area there discharges into the right-of-way for I-135, and so the water goes along there until it gets to a cross ditch that drains under the interstate and over to West Dry Creek. But being flat and not a lot of grade, that the water doesn't move particularly well.
Just for go ahead, I'm sorry.
This is going to drain to the west, you said?
The water that comes, all the water that is in the South 9th Street corridor eventually gets under the interstate and drains over to West Dry Creek, which is there along, you've got the culvert bridge at Schilling Road, and that goes over West Dry Creek there in Magnolia as well. But all the runoff from the west side of 9th Street ends up going under the interstate and to the west to West Dry Creek. Even Midstate Plaza, all those areas there, they all drain under the interstate and over to West Dry Creek.
Just for clarification, we're talking about single-story, mini-storage structures.
Well, what we're talking about is it would be a planned district, and so if Mr. Augustine's zoning request is approved, he has requested a deferred site plan submittal, so as development is proposed for each of these uses, he would have to submit a plan to the Planning Commission and/or City Commission, so the particulars of that would be But what Mr. Augustine's tried to show with the photographs that are in your packet are some photographs of his mini storage facility over there on North Ohio. And so he can explain that better than I, but I think what he was trying to convey there is that if this was approved, that's the type of facility he would be building.
I understand. I'm not trying to be a contrarian. I'm kind of going through my mind all the times I've driven across the country, and those type of storage facilities off an interstate to me are almost as ubiquitous as a McDonald's or a Burger King. And I understand that we maybe have a different standard because interstate property or interstate adjacent property is a little bit more rare, but I guess I'm having a hard time following the logic in terms of aesthetics versus a truck stop or fast food place, the back of a mall, back of a Walmart.
Well, it's all subjective, and it's all in the eye of the beholder. So
Understood.
it is the main thing I can emphasize here is that whatever plans materialize, those would come back before the Planning Commission or City Commission before they were built. But I think the reason we included those in the packet is I believe that's what Mr. Augustine's trying to convey, that if his request is approved, that's the type of facility that he would want to develop there.
Right. We'd have Mr. Augustine come
We
forward.
do have Mr. Augustine here, and be happy to turn the microphone over to him.
We'll let you
Mayor
go
and
on the
Commissioners.
offensive first. Okay.
Pardon me?
We'll let you go on the offensive first.
Okay, sounds good. All right, well, I did include some pictures in your packet there, and there's a letter referencing our collaboration with the USD 305 School District to develop that site. We had to exchange some property there on 440 North Ohio, and they were concerned about aesthetics. And what I tried to show you here in this illustration is that it's a nice development. If you flip through those pictures, I have an example of something that doesn't look so well. Keep flipping right there. One of the allowed uses here in the overlay district is farm and ranch supply stores. If you look there to the left, that's the back of Orchlands. And that could be potentially something that people could see going down the interstate in lieu of the mini storage, which is a nice, clean development with no outside items that could be stored and stacked up and trash blowing off of them and that type of stuff. So that's one of the things I wanted to illustrate to you, is that the mini storage that we develop is clean. USD 305 was concerned about that when we exchanged property, but at the end of the day, I assured them that it would look good. We'd put up a wrought iron fence, and they were very pleased. And I had Ken, reached out to Ken to write that letter for me, because when we finished that development, he personally called me and said, thank you for a nice development. It's a nice addition to the school district there, and it's not offensive or anything to what we're doing there. So that's why you have that letter in your packet. I also understand you have another letter of support in your packet as well for our development. One of the other reasons that we feel that the property lends itself to that type of development is it's very deep. If you go along that South 9th corridor there, the property from 9th to the interstate is very deep. And so what do you do with that? And one of the things I pointed out to the planning commissioners is that Riffle Drive there, everything that's on Riffle Drive seems to have a very short lifespan because it's tucked back in there and nobody knows it's there. And so we're trying to put something there that's doesn't have a high impact to traffic, but has a use that's sustainable and can be there for, the duration of the life of the development. As was pointed out by someone on the commission, what is the difference between mini warehouses and wholesale houses on number 21? That's a overlay district conditional use. I cannot see the difference, and we talked about that at the planning commission, but they still view that as a significant difference. You have agriculture, implement sales and service. That can also be a lot of items stored outside that don't look all that great to the interstate traffic. And Junction City, as you go down Junction City through on I-70, they have a lot of storage developments along I-70 there as well. So this is on Interstate 135, but we could see that being kind of the same thing for that area. New housing developments over there on, Schilling and Ohio Street, and there's also a new one being developed just off of Schilling and Foxborough. So we think there'd be some need for additional storage out in that area because there's more housing development that's coming to Salina. So I'd like you to reconsider and approve many warehouses for that development. Our contract is dependent upon that, and if it's not approved, we will not pursue and finalize the contract. So if you have any other questions for me, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
Questions? Questions? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
All right. And any questions, comments, concerns from the public?
I'm just going to clarify one thing for you. I didn't, under the map amendment aspect, under option number 2, I failed to identify the requisite number of votes. So at today's meeting, if you want to disagree as to the addition of many warehouses, you can do that, but it would require 4 affirmative votes to overturn that recommendation as to the district. And if there were not 4 votes, then it would go back to the Planning Commission for reconsideration. But if there's 4 votes in the affirmative, then you can make the addition of many warehouses to the district that would be created in this location. As I was consulting with Mr. Bankston, I noticed that on option 2, I failed to list the required number of votes, but that would be, it would require 4 affirmative votes to do something different than what the Planning Commission recommended on first consideration. I'm sorry for that lack of clarification.
That's only for the map amendment and not
That's
for
only
the
for
text
the map
amendment.
amendment, not the text amendment.
Mr. Mantle, come on up.
Norman Manslin, could you plant trees for a barrier behind them buildings? I've traveled in other states. We've got trees along the interstates. We've got
Mr. Mantle, please direct your comments to the governing body.
I'm talking to him.
You need to address the governing body, please.
Well, they can listen.
He can listen as you address the governing body.
Well, how am I going to talk to him?
That's not the point of the citizen forum.
Come up here, I'll talk to you. Okay, why can't we plant trees for barriers, sound barriers? They do it in other states. I've traveled in 38 states, and they plant trees along the interstates. Of course, we're in a drought, so I don't know if we can do that. But you could add, if they could see their way to do that.
The same idea came through my mind. I don't know if I was thinking trees or bushes, but something. All right.
Good thought.
Dalton McDowell, Salina. I think it's pretty good. My only concern is we keep expanding out south. At some point in time, there should be a fire study done to determine response times out south. District 3 has all the new developments pretty much. That's one Station 3 has all the new developments that's going out. That was just the other stuff too. I think we should do a fire study before we keep building out south, because I don't think Station 3 can handle all the added buildings that they have, plus all the ones they have off of 9th Street that are commercial. Half of their the area they cover is commercial.
And I'd ask either Mr. Andrew or Mr. Scrigg, at what point in, and I'll just use the term development process of the property, does the fire coverage get brought into the discussion?
The availability of fire as part of the comprehensive planning and the zoning consideration response times is something that the fire department monitors on a regular basis, so they actually look at their call volume and their response times. They also are accredited, and so that's a consideration for their accreditation. So I'm not going to say that has merit. That's something they look at on an annual basis.
So that is not something that would not have been done for this proposed development at this time?
Well, Mr. Andrew may be able to speak to it a little bit more, but the availability of public safety services is a consideration, but not down to fire station location or alterations in response to.
What we do in preparation of our report is we share the proposal with the fire department and the fire marshal. We confirm where the response would come from and what the response time is, and if there are other customers in the area. For instance, the Kubota Great Plains plant is within the fire response area for station number 3, so this is not extending the range that they would have to cover. It just is additional improved property. And so what we can't address is how many vehicles or staff, or what the staffing is at station number 3. What we're charged to look at is where it would be covered from, and if they can meet the adequate response time in terms of distance. And this is not extending the distance they have to respond to, because they're already serving property that's within the vicinity, including the roadway in and the Kubota Great Plains plant. So from that standpoint, Mr. McDowell's concern may be about the staffing or the vehicle levels at Station 3, but this is within the range of response times that are needed.
All right, thank you.
Commissioners, Mayor, in preparation for this, I also went back and looked at, or in preparation for my Planning Commission appointment, I went back and watched the meeting that took place and the discussion surrounding this. And the main concern was the aesthetics from the interstate, from that back side, as they were concerning the site plan there. Two things. I think, number one, we should look at the travel center that has been developed by Property 6 over in Abilene. And I think it looks very sharp, and what they have done over there, we can take that into consideration. Secondly, there are a lot worse sites from the interstate, as we can all see all around the country. So I may get in trouble with my fellow planning commissioners, but I urge you to reconsider this. This is a development that I think will thrive here in Salina. And as Mr. Augustine said, that idea of mini storage weighs heavily on his decision for this contract. And I think this would be a benefit to the city of Salina, especially for that area down there. And I also think it will get much use, as he already mentioned, from the new developments that are coming in as well.
Thank you.
Mayor, to the point that Mr. Augustine has done good work other places, I don't know if the other commissioners know, but Ken Kennedy, the person that wrote that letter, is a former planning commissioner member. He was there when I began on the planning commission, and he may, in fact, have been involved in the drafting of these conditional uses for that corridor. So I find his support for this to be very compelling in this matter.
I agree.
And it's been a concern of mine for a long time that we talk about the aesthetics from the interstate. I think this would be an improvement, you know, compared to the back door of shopping centers and the different things. This, I don't see that it would be a hindrance, or anything new is going to look better than what's been sitting there for 40 years. So I don't have a problem with it.
To piggyback on Commissioner Longbine, I mean, we've got building supply stores, convenience, gasoline, food stores, farm and ranch supplies, garden centers and nurseries, all in that same area. I can't see that this exception could
And my comment it's not going to affect my vote on this, but when I drive through a city and I see those things, I see businesses that are thriving, people are buying things, so I'm not as concerned about the way it looks as I am the fact that it's generating money. I mean, you can generate money and be ugly, but I mean, as far as farm supply, I mean, it's a rural area. I mean, you can't hide the way it looks. I mean, it's supposed to be in our backyard here. But we have some stretches along the highway that don't look pretty and aren't an attractive welcome to Salina advertisement. But I think if it's landscaped well and just leave it up to the folks who approve the plats and persuade those who design to make it look pretty. We're ready for some action.
Yeah, I'm a little confused on what action we're going to take.
We are first going to consider the text amendment, and
The first
I'll let
item would
Mr.
be the text amendment. And so if there is a desire to include mini warehouse in the text amendment, then the option identified as option two, the commission could amend number 22-1104 to add mini warehouses. So if that was your desire, you could make a motion to approve ordinance 22-1104, including the addition of mini warehouses on first reading, and that would address the text amendment. And then once you've decided that, then you would move to the map amendment and make a recommendation as to what the zoning should be for this property and whether that many warehouses should be included on this property.
Thank you.
May I, Mayor?
Yes, sir.
I move that the commission amend ordinance number 22-11104 to add many warehouses to the list of conditional uses in the CO district.
I'll second that. Oh, go ahead, sir.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to amend ordinance number 22-11104 to add mini warehouses to the list of conditional uses in the CO district.
Mayor?
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think that motion should probably also include approval on first reading.
Okay, thank you.
It
Yeah.
speaks of amending
And
it, but I think we
approval
ought
on
to.
first reading.
Thank you.
All right, that's fine with the second. All right, we probably had enough discussion. Any more? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 4-0. And now, if there's a desire, any action on the map amendment?
Mayor, I move we approve ordinance number 22-1105 with the addition of many warehouses as permitted uses in the district.
Mr. Ryan, could you pull the microphone down? We cannot hear you. Haven't heard you all evening.
Oh, okay. I've got it right where staff told me to put it, but I'm sorry if you can't hear me. Maybe I'm losing my voice. As to the map amendment, the commission move that we approve ordinance number 22-1105 with the addition of many warehouses as permitted use in the district.
This is on first reading as well.
And first reading as well.
Is there a second?
that.
All right. Been moved and seconded to approve ordinance 22-11105 on first reading with the addition of mini warehouses as a permitted use in the district. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 4-0. Could ask Commissioner Hoppick to come back. All righty, we are now at other business.
Yes, Mayor, I would like to revisit Resolution 22-8027 that we passed last week. Item was brought up to me by a citizen in the event of moving the citizens forum to the end of the meeting. In the event that we have an executive session, that the executive session should be scheduled after the citizens forum.
From a procedural perspective, if our next action of business is dependent on the executive session, we would then probably be at an impasse on the agenda. It just as if we were the last issue, if there was a legal technicality that we needed. I understand the question. I'll ask the city attorney directly if that's a feasible way to do it.
While he's thinking a moment, if it's helpful, our current resolution does not place executive session in that list of agenda items. Staff adds that as needed when an agenda item comes up, so we typically add it to the end of the meeting. Now, if you are in the middle of a deliberation on a topic and the need for executive session comes up, you could go into executive session and return, but I think our intended practice would be that it would be the last item on the agenda, and then we do declare whether, as part of the executive session, whether it's likely that action will be taken when we return. So I think...
So for planned executive sessions,
Yes.
those could go... at the very
Many
end.
times, they're the last thing at the meeting, come back, adjourn.
Right.
And staff is saying that's where you still continue to.
That would be our intention. If you wish for that to be formalized in some way, that could be done by way of amending, further amending the resolution to indicate executive session if needed or something along those lines. But I interrupted.
No,
Well, I
that's fine.
appreciate that clarification. If that's where staff has typically put those items and will continue to do so, I don't think there's any need for any clarification. We'll just continue with them. But you're saying if the need for executive session comes up on a scheduled matter, then there's that issue to discuss.
Yes, and what should be similar to what the approach we use today is if there's a likelihood of executive session related to an agenda item, we would convene an executive session as needed. If there's more of a standalone executive session item that we know needs to be placed on your agenda, that would be placed at the end.
Yeah, I'm certainly, I think that's a good policy, and if we don't, because the executive sessions weren't part of the original list of items on the agenda.
Correct.
Anyway.
Correct. It doesn't, that's currently not part of the listed agenda, 1 through 10, I think,
Right.
agenda items. They get added on a sporadic basis.
So
But
we could just leave it to the city managers.
It's certainly up to you.
We haven't given you direction up to this point, and you've always put them at the end, so I just...
Right. If you wish to formalize that, then I don't know that we'd put it in the list because it then presumes you're going to have one every meeting, but we could clarify that in some way if that's the governing body's desire.
It's up to the other four, but I'm comfortable just knowing that we all understand where it's going to end up.
I am as well. I mean, as it stands, they'll be placed after citizens forum.
Yep. I just wanted clarification that
That's
going forward.
That's a good point to bring up. All right, any other business?
I did have one
sorry.
other item. Before I came down to the meeting, I read the assessment of the Hutchinson-Reno County fire, and I think as a community, we need to remember Reno County as they lost 1 life and 36 homes in the fire here this past weekend.
Did not know that. Wow. All right, if there's no other business, we'll now move to citizens forum, which I'm just curious on a technicality. Since we have gone through our meeting and its agenda already, is it necessary to exclude items that are on the agenda? And that the action's already been taken? I'm just curious.
I don't think that's a legal question, Mayor. I'll pass on that one.
Okay.
Well, if it's, maybe I shouldn't wade into this either, but to me, that would be analogous to you, previously you made a decision in any given week and someone came to Citizens Forum the following week to tell you how they felt about the decision you made the week prior. So I think the intent of saying the citizens forum was not to be about an agenda item, was that there would be an opportunity later. But if someone wanted to now give you feedback after you've acted, I think that would be permissible.
All right, because that,
But let's not.
well, that prepositional phrase is just, it's in there like one of the subsets of the Pledge of Allegiance, and I just didn't know whether to exclude it. We'll see how it goes. This is an opportunity for you to come up and address the commission, and we do have a 3-minute timer, so I'd like to stick to that.
Deborah
Thank you.
Corrales. So I've provided today how America's dog became public enemy number one and why they are making a comeback. American Pit Bull Terrier and the other two that fall under this pass the American temperament test by 86%, second only to the Labrador Retriever. I've also provided information on the Victory dogs and what happened to them after they were taken from Michael Vick. It's noted that 4 or 5 of them became therapy dogs in hospitals. Most of them passed their Good Citizens Awards, and this is what they put up with. According to court documents, from time to time, Vick and his cohorts rolled the dogs, put them in a pit for short battles to see which ones had the right stuff. Those that fought got attention, food, vitamins, training, and the ones that showed no taste for blood were killed by gunshot, electrocution, drowning, hanging, or at least in one case, being repeatedly slammed on the ground. It's impossible to say what Jasmine saw while circling the axle deep in the woods, but dogs can hear a tick yawn at 50 yards. The sounds of fights and executions undoubtedly filtered through the trees. Multiple studies have shown that if you take 2 mammals, let's say rats, and put them in boxes side by side, then give the first one electrical shocks, the reaction of the second one in terms of brainwave and nervous system activity will be identical. A certified animal behaviorist and executive vice president of the ISPCA says the trauma isn't limited to the animals that are experiencing the pain. Also, I've included pitiful excuses. This was done by a student at Central High. Note that the now voters are 18 years old and can vote, and 85.7% pit bulls are not vicious. Those are your voters that are coming up. Court declares Leawood, Kansas pit bull ban unconstitutional. And when I said I'd do my homework, here's a thing of your rules. Nowhere does it say that I can't have pictures hanging from the podium. You guys just did a display with a bunch of pictures up there, but a private citizen doesn't have the same right. Is that legal?
I guess.
This is my 3 minutes, correct? Well, they can't talk to me. It says, don't expect conversations with the commissioners in here. He can't answer a legal question?
Mike, your mic.
Okay, well, in here it says no applauding, but some people were applauding earlier. This one says I can't present pictures. But you guys just did it. I've already contacted an attorney on these rules.
Norman Mantle again. It's still about water. They are curtailing water in other states. They have shut down all water to agricultural use in California. Where do you get your vegetables? We better shut down economic development. We better shut down economic population growth, because as the population increases, so do our problems increase. It takes water to grow food. China has put population controls in place, and it works. They're reducing their population because they are overpopulated. You bring in more economic development, more businesses, which creates a demand on our water. We're running out of water. The lakes are being drawn down as we speak, and it's not going to rain. We have got about 2 months. If it doesn't rain, we're in trouble. Because right now, there are cattle being brought to Kansas from the drought areas. It takes 18 months to get that piece of meat back on the table. So we're going to have to reduce our population growth. Last but not least, have any of you ever attended a horse race? Do you know what it means when they say the horse is running with blinders on?
Dalton McDowell, City of Salina. I know some other counties have done it, some other cities have done it. The City of Wichita has done it. There was a study that, I don't have it in front of me, it was out of, I believe it was out of the Michigan State University. They did a study on impacts to our streams and waterways on the overuse of road salts. They have found that Lake Superior, if they did not slow down the road salt usage, Lake Superior in the next 65 years would actually become a saltwater lake due to so much road salt being used up in that area. And we have so many waterways in the city of Salina. Why are we not using brine? Brine does not, it does get washed off. You're saving money a lot. Yeah, it's expensive to start it, to do it. It's like $100,000 for the equipment, and then that's just the mixers and stuff like that. KDOT uses it. It's the stuff that you see on the interstates that's lines. It's brine. You're saving a lot of money, and you're saving the environment. This year, there was a few times that even KDOT didn't go out and do pre-treatment of anything, and the city did. All that just got washed away and wasted a bunch of money. At least with if you did the pre-treatment with salt brine or even calcium chloride, because they do there's several different salt applicators that you can use. Rock salt's what KDOT uses. They mix it with water. It saves a lot of money, and it saves the environment. The river project, we're going to have issues with the river project if we keep using salt down, so much salt that is not needed when you have several different other chemicals that do it. You have the salt brine that you can use. I know you guys have a unit. They don't like using it because in case they have to go back to salt, you have to pull the unit off and put the salt box back on. Can we at least try it one time? The intersections, it melts at intersections, especially at the stoplights, like yesterday when all that was snow-packed. Some of the stoplights with the stuff underground, to be able to sense it, is not working right because it can't get through the ice or sleet, whatever. I think it's time we change. If KDOT uses that more than they use salt. There is a time and a place for salt, and there's a time and a place for liquid de-icer. Pre-treatment, we're wasting a bunch of salt, and we're contaminating our groundwater.
Okay, I will assume those in our streets department who need to hear that have heard it.
What are you talking to me?
Well, you and the audience, I mean, the five of us probably collectively don't have the technical knowledge to make that decision, but the city does employ people who do.
Ben Winholt, Salina. This is in regards to the resolution 228027, establishing the rules of procedure and order of business that was approved 3-2 last week, with public forum moved to the end of the meeting. I wish to thank Mayor Davis for moving the public comments to before your discussion so that the suggested 5:30 start time could be put on the table for discussion and not have just one choice to move it to the end of the meeting. I am, however, disappointed that after the commissioner's lengthy discussion that the public had no voice to argue or agree with some of the points made during that discussion. Maybe there's a legal rule in place that doesn't allow a second public input on any one agenda item. That being said, here's my rebuttal on a couple of points. It was noted by one commissioner that, and I quote, "They are sitting in these seats to take care of city business and not there to accommodate the agenda to public input," unquote. That is not only the reason why you're here. You don't answer to the city manager or a city head or a staff member. You were elected by the citizens to monitor and spend the citizens' financial investment in this great city along with other duties, and to listen to the public wants and needs. And another point, issue of accommodating developers or individuals that are not a particular agenda item, possibly making them wait longer than they should, be given a quicker time during the meeting because of their possible investment into the community. Well, what about the investment of the lifelong resident that has made financially to this town, and all the citizens' money that you have a financially stable community that any developer can invest in? In closing, I would hope that a city staff member will take the initiative or be given the task of keeping me honest, because I have created a spreadsheet to keep a history during the next 6 months with a target date of August 22nd being put back on the agenda of meeting links times, public forum start times, and a tally of how many public forums were before or after a suggested 5:30 set time. Thank you.
Mayor, Commissioners, Chad Farber from the city of Salina. I want to piggyback on what Mr. Windholtz just said. I was quite disappointed at the end of last meeting with the direction that this commission took. Some of the statements were quite condescending towards the public. I do appreciate the fact that you allow the public to speak, but as we heard just a moment ago, now with public forum, citizen forum at the end of the meeting, there's no longer need to comment on agenda items. Is that the direction we're going to go? We're just going to remove public comment from agenda items as well. The school board has already done that here in town. If an item is on the agenda, you're not allowed to speak on it as a public. I think that's a dangerous direction to take. I also think it is very derogatory to the citizens of Salina that we take the feelings of developers and realtors and place them ahead of the citizens that elected you guys. I sent an email out. I hope all of you got that, read through it, and it kind of put my words better in writing than standing up here in front of you guys. But it's quite disappointing that you would take the feelings, the time schedules of developers and realtors who perhaps have traveled from out of city, who some may be citizens, as Mr. Linkowitz mentioned last week, some may be from out of town. But you have prioritized out-of-town schedules over the input of citizens, almost as if it is in effect trying to stifle the input from citizens. This is the reason that just in this last election, there was a petition taken and a drive and an ordinance passed overwhelmingly by the majority of the citizens of Salina to limit some of the powers of this commission, because it is becoming a habit, a habitual thing, where this board will not take into consideration the ideas, the input from the public. And so your power needs to be limited. And I'll tell you, that ordinance is still sitting out there with no effect, regardless of the fact that citizens have already voted on it and a majority has approved it. As I was told by one member of this board, of this commission, it will take a parliamentary action or by parliamentary procedure that one of the aye votes will have to bring this back up to address this again. I would encourage you to do so. If you don't like the 5:30 time slot, which gives opportunity for citizens to have their input, put it back at the beginning of the meeting, let the citizens come at a set time so that they can speak their part. This idea of being at the end of the meeting does not sit well with the public. I've heard so many comments, and I'll leave it at that because I know my time is out. I would urge you reconsider the decision that you guys made last week.
Mr. Farber, just a point of clarification. The public still has the opportunity to comment on any agenda item. We don't,
At this point, yes, sir.
well, we have no plans to change that. I mean, we don't ever bring it back for consideration until the public's had a chance to speak. And anyone who's sat in this chair will tell you they have forgotten to ask for public comment, and they get looks from people on either side, and, oh, yeah. But, you know, we're not, well, only speak for me, but it ain't leaving. Anyone else?
Carol Reed, Salina, Kansas. My commissioners, mayor. I have 2 or 3 things. First of all, I agree with those 2 gentlemen. I had to leave early last week, so I didn't get to give my 2 cents, but I wanted the 5:30. I thought that would make it a lot easier, especially for the working folks. I'm retired, so, you know, time is, I'm pretty free. Point number 2, I wanted to remind you of the implicit bias test. I don't know if you've done that or administered that to the employees, the implicit bias test that we paid $10,000 for. I would like to see the results of that at some point. Has that been taken yet?
We're going to discuss so is it April? The study won't be done until April.
Correct. And it, well, I'll let you finish your comment.
Okay, on to number 3. You can think on that. I just want to address, Mr. Farber did mention, you know, about the board for the school board 305. And I'd like to make a comment because honestly, we need you men. We need you desperately. We have a principal, a librarian, 2 teachers, and 2 citizens who have agreed that the book that was in question, which is, in my point of view, is full of very improper, immoral conversation. The book is called All Boys Aren't Blue. And we need your help because I read that there's a statute in the Kansas Revisor in 2021. They amended and repealed statutes, but one of the statutes is 21-6401, and it's promoting obscenity, promoting obscenity to minors. And if you go down there and I'll give you a copy of this, comes down to D, point D. It says promoting obscenity to minors is promoting obscenity as defined in subsection, where a recipient of the obscene material or obscene device or a member of the audience of an obscene performance is a child under the age of 18. Our school libraries have become porn shops, and I am so afraid for our children. There's over 30 books in our libraries that are far from being what we would call moral, and I know you are all of morals and good morals, and I would like to see our children raised with those. So would you like a copy of this statute? I can leave it with the attorney here. He can look it over.
Go to the city clerk and then get it to us. Though you do understand, we do not.
I'm just asking you,
Control
I'm presenting my concerns,
the
and I'd
school
like
board and
you to
vice versa.
join with us if you could.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sherry Harp, Salina, Kansas. And this is hard for me because I know it's hard for you guys too. That is an issue that we are concerned about. We talk about making how beautiful this town is and how everything looks pretty nice, but we are not concentrating on our schools' curriculum, and we understand it's the school board, but twice the school board has failed us. They put that book in there without, well, I won't say without looking into it, because they did look into it, but they also took it with those 6 people that she just mentioned, that they read it and put it back in there, did not take it out. South High School ranks 215 out of 320 high schools. 215 out of 320 high schools. Having this book in their library does not help our children at all. And this book can be picked up by any high schooler. The districts in parts of the country have begun removing this book from the library shelves. I'm talking about libraries, school libraries. I'm not talking about libraries in general. It started in Kansas City. This was a man called Mr. Johnson. He's the author. He says, I refuse to be erased. I refuse to let anybody tell me that a truth of my childhood experience told in detail is too much for another child to read if I can potentially help them. I'm going to tell you something. Don't want to do this, but I have to. In this book, it says, now, first of all, every one of you have had sexual escapades in your life, whether it be you don't want to read somebody's sexual escapades in your classroom. You wouldn't write it and put it down in the classroom for people to read. This says, I remember the condom was blue and flavored like cotton candy. I put some lube on it and got him up on his knees, and I began to slide it into him and behind. I tried not to force it because I imagined that it would be painful. I hate reading this because it's so filth. I mean, you want to do something like that, you do it on your own, but don't put it in books. And then when he says, I hope that children can learn from me. Learn what? The school board allowed that book into the school, South High School. We went up against it. We said there was 3 people that went up and said they wanted to review. Those 6 people said that this book should still be in there. We need help in this community because we cannot let these books continue. There's 30 of them in these schools from grade school up. Clean up our schools if we're going to clean up the city.
I do want to just read one section from our ways of operating here. And bear with me. Okay. And it's under submission of written information. Written information may be submitted to the city clerk prior to a city commission meeting for distribution to commissioners and key staff members, or may be presented during the meeting upon recognition by the mayor as the speaker in the manner described below. 10 copies should be provided to ensure that all applicable parties are able to receive and review the information provided. So ideally, it works best if it's given to the city clerk before the meeting. I won't speak for the other commissioners, but once I walk in that room, my brain is locked on the agenda in front of me, and it's hard to absorb new information in at 3:58. Just read a little slower and get older, that's all. Any other comments? All right, entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved and seconded to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. We'll be back here next Monday.